What is going on, everybody? Welcome back in to another edition of the Fan Committee Football Podcast. I am, of course, one of your hosts, Joe Tooman, as always, joined by my co-host, Michael Herrera. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Joe. Doing good. I'm ready to talk about some Titans Colts. I'm ready.
Yeah, we're getting into our next division here, the AFC South. This is a division I think a lot of people might look down on, might consider a little weak, but we're talking about two teams here who have had some pretty good success over the past few years in the Colts and the Titans. We're going to start with the Colts here, Mike. And this is a team that almost made the playoffs last year until their famous collapse against the Jaguars in Week 17 off of
Yeah.
a terrible performance from Carson Wentz that wound up with him getting traded to Washington. So coming into the season, they got Matt Ryan replacing Wentz. They got a lot of other changes that we can talk about. What are your expectations for this Colts team just generally?
I have playoff expectations for these Colts team because they should not have thrown it away like they did last time. And honestly, for being real, I think that they won't because they now have a good quarterback who they can rely on. Because I do feel that Carson Wentz kind of threw away that Jaguars game for them with some very questionable decisions. But Matt Ryan's an upgrade. So I think this is a team that definitely needs to make the playoffs this season. If they don't make the playoffs this season, then something's wrong. I think defense is pretty good too. I think the defense could be a little bit better, but it's not terrible. So I do think that they need to make the playoffs this year because they definitely should have last year.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. They definitely should have made it. Of course, they should not have lost to the terrible Jaguars, but I think it forced them to make some changes in the right direction. Of course, we mentioned Matt Ryan coming over from the Falcons to become the new quarterback, and I think Matt Ryan's due for a bounce back year this year. Last year he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great either on the Falcons, who were. I mean, let's be honest, the Falcons were a little feisty last year. I mean, until the end of the year, they were still kind of in the wild card hunt. The Cordell Patterson, guys like that kind of broke out. And I thought Matt Ryan, he didn't have a great year statistically, but I thought he still did his job. Now he's going to be playing behind this Colts offensive line. I think he might be due for a bounce back. What do you think about that fit? Putting Jonathan Taylor with him as well, who he's going as number one pick in all the fantasy drafts. He had a ton of touchdowns last year, led the league in rushing. I just think it's a really good fit for Matt Ryan. I think he's got a lot of pressure taken off him.
No, I do think that Matt Ryan's definitely due for a bounce back year because he was trying to do a lot on his own, especially in terms of like the receiving game. They didn't have any really receivers going on because they lost Calvin Ridley. So like he was asked to do a lot. But I do think that he's gonna bounce back because this is a much stronger offense overall. And like, yeah, the Falcons were like feisty, like you were saying, like they were scrappy. They were a team that like they were gonna give a little bit of fight. But ultimately I do think Colts are a much better, well-rounded team. And I think that Matt Ryan's going to improve from it.
I agree. And I just think Matt Ryan has proven it enough times that even in his, now he's in his mid to late 30s, but I think we saw with a guy like Stafford, and I don't think Matt Ryan's going to be as good as Stafford because he doesn't have quite the weapons. He still has good weapons here, but not obviously like the Rams. But I think Matt Ryan's another player that's proven in the past that he can be a very good quarterback. And just that change of scenery, even after so many years with the Falcons, just like Stafford with the Lions, I think it can reinvigorate a guy, and I think it could definitely help. And his receivers, you mentioned, yes, he doesn't have the tight end power of Kyle Pitts anymore, but wide receiver wise, and also running back wise, with Taylor and even Nyheim Hines as a pass catching back, receivers, this receiving room is way better than the Falcons had last year without Calvin Ridley. Of
Yeah.
course, led by Michael Pittman. What are you expecting from Michael Pittman this year? Because he was pretty quietly good last year. He had 88 catches, even with some up and down play from Wentz.
Yeah, no, I'm expecting big things from him. I had Michael Pittman on my fantasy team last year, and I remember in that game against the Jets. Ooh, I got like 25 points or something off him. That guy was going crazy. But yeah, no, I do expect big things from Michael Pittman, especially because he's the number one receiver in this offense right now. But I do expect Michael Pittman to like lead this group. I just think that the depth chart as it stands is kind of weird. I think it's kind of weird that Paris Campbell is starting over Ashton Dolan, but that's just me personally because I don't think Paris Campbell has shown any of the traits that were like the reason why he was picked in the second round like a few years back. I think Alex Pierce. A lot of people are like, I saw a lot of people like, oh, Alex Pierce was a terrible draft pick. He never went over 100 yards or 1,000 yards. Sorry. And I don't know. I do think this is a really good receiving core, especially if you factor in also tight ends. I think Wiley Cox is great as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Alec Pierce, their second round draft pick. I think coming in, I think they expect him to be the number two receiver in this offense, and I think like I don't know, the buzz is sound out of training camp sounds like he's ready for that role. And then you
Yeah.
mentioned Paris Campbell. I mean, he's dealt with a ton of injuries, but to your point, even when he's been healthy, he hasn't lit the world on fire. But I think a lot of people are also people that cover the Colts anyway. That sounds like he's had a good camp as well, and they're kind of hoping he can solidify his spot as the starting slot receiver as well. So they're going to hope that in Pierce and Campbell, they kind of suddenly go from really only having one capable receiver to three. I think that's what they're hoping for.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned Ashton Doolin, who's kind of a special team extraordinaire, but also has flashed some receiving talent. So him as the fourth receiver could also have some potential. You even throw in Kiki Kute, who he flashed some potential with the Texans, but he's another guy who's had injury issues throughout his career. So it'll be interesting to see if he can even compete for any playing time in this offense. But he's there as well. So I think they're hoping that behind Pittman, a lot of these guys can develop and step up. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah. I think having someone like Michael Pittman to lead that group is really big for a lot of these guys because I think they can really lean on him and they can like count on him to like make those plays, giving them the time that they need to develop. Because you know what, you're totally right. I didn't mean to like sound like I hate Paris Campbell. I don't. It's just that obviously, like you said, he's got injuries. Like maybe if he's had a good camp, good for him. Hope so. But no, yeah, I do think that this receiver group it's pretty solid. It's a pretty good receiver group, all things considered.
Yeah, I think it could be, like I said before, it's at least better than what Matt Ryan was working with
Yes.
in Atlanta last year for sure. And sure, there might be a lot of unproven guys behind Pittman, but I think the hope would be that, with this O line, with Taylor there to, carry the run game they're probably going to still be a run heavy team just because you got Taylor, who's, he's in the offensive player of the year running. Actually, I think he won offensive player of the year, but he's also in the MVP running as well. I like Naeem Hines a lot. I think he's a really versatile pass catching back. I'm actually curious to see if he gets more playing time or like not more playing time, but more touches with Matt Ryan under center because I think Matt Ryan, being the veteran he is, could similar to Philip Rivers when Philip Rivers was there. Philip Rivers always loved his receiving backs. That's when Naeem Hines, I think, might have had his best season 2 years back. And Matt Ryan might not have the same track record, but he can definitely at the same time he like Tevin Coleman. I was someone who had a similar role. I could see that Naeem Hines playing that kind of role in this offense as well. I think they have a good dynamic at running back here for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. I totally get what you're saying, especially because also with the Philip Rivers example, like Matt Ryan and Philip Rivers, these are veteran quarterbacks. They know when to take their check downs,
Yeah.
something that Carson Wentz never really knows how to do,
Carson Wentz just goes and starts running and then fumbles. That's what he does when he needs to check
or
down.
he chucks it up and
Yeah,
know when he's near the ball.
yeah, yeah.
But no, I totally agree. I do think that Jonathan Taylor, Naeem Hines is a great 1-2 punch.
Jonathan Taylor's the guy who's going to make this offense go, and he was awesome last year, 1,800 yards rushing. What do you think about the offensive line right now, though? Because a lot of people attribute part of his success to how great their O line was, and I still think it's pretty good, but they did lose two starters in Mark Lewinsky going to the Giants and I feel like one of their tackles isn't there as well because I don't believe Matt Pryor started for this team last year. I'm neglecting who else they lost, but they do have two new starters on the O line.
I do think that going from Galinsky to Pinter is a downgrade, but I do still think that this is a very solid O line. I say Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Braden Smith, some of the best linemen in the
Yeah,
league.
I
Crazy
mean
to
Quentin
think
Nelson especially. Yeah,
about. Quentin Nelson's like probably like top three.
yeah,
The guy's
he
insane.
might be the best guard in the league for sure.
Oh, he's definitely the best guard. But if we're
Yeah,
talking like
yeah,
whatever, the point is, yeah, this is a pretty good O line, and it's definitely gonna help Jonathan Taylor. But I do think Jonathan Taylor like is that guy. Regardless, you don't have the season he did being like just an offensive lineman based quarter like running
yeah,
back because like
yeah.
Jonathan Taylor had an amazing season, and although personally I think he should have won Offensive Player of the Year, and it's a shame he didn't.
Oh, Cooper Cup won. I said earlier he
Cooper
did.
Cup, yeah.
You're right.
I it's because that's like a whole tangent. Like when NFL honors comes up, we can talk about that more then. But I think it's really stupid that a quarterback has to win MVP every year. I think that's
Yeah,
dumb. I
yeah,
think Cooper Cup was the most valuable player in the league. He literally won the Triple Crown. But
yeah.
that's neither here nor there. And then Jonathan Taylor should have won Offensive Player of the Year. Not to disparage Mr. Rogers and his psychedelic-filled season, which is insane if that's true.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think this is a very good offense. The offensive line's not as good as it used to be, but it's still very solid. Like honestly, I guess the only weak point I'd say is Danny Pinter and Matt Pryor. But even then, like those are just like they're solid guys. Like I'm not too worried about the offensive line either. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, and I looked it up. It was Eric Fisher who was the left tackle last year because he was coming off that ACL tear. He wasn't terrific, so that's why they didn't re-sign him. But Matt Pryor is going to be taking his spot at left tackle, the former Eagle. I don't
Hmm.
think he was great with the Eagles, but last year as a backup with the Colts when he got time to play, PFF gave him some decent grades, so maybe they're confident in his ability at left tackle as well. But that's a big position, so it'll be interesting to see if either of those guys can step up to the plate.
No, for sure. I think I do understand if they're saying Matt Pryor wasn't he was like an okay backup on the Eagles, but maybe the Colts system suits him better and maybe things will get better. But
And like
yeah.
you said before, they have enough really good linemen on this team that, maybe that's why I'm not too worried about them, and I still expect this line and the run game to be fine.
Yeah, no, for sure. They're gonna be okay. This offense is gonna be honestly better than last year.
I
So
agree. I
I think
definitely
they'll be
agree.
okay.
As we mentioned, Matt Ryan's a big part of that. And even if Matt Ryan was to get hurt, we got Nick Foles reuniting with Frank Reich here, so we could see some fun backup action if Matt Ryan were to get injured as
Yeah.
well. I was a fan of that signing, so.
No, for sure. And also I just want to point out from the preseason game, I don't know if you watched it, but I just want to point out that
Sam Ellinger.
Sam Ellinger was
Yeah,
popping
he
off.
was.
He
He was
was
putting up some numbers.
I know he was playing against backups, but he was playing good. And honestly, Nick Foles did not play well.
I didn't watch the
So
polls. I only
I'm not
saw.
gonna lie, Sam Ellinger, I think this is what like his third year in the league. I would not be shocked if Nick Foles gets cut and Sam Ellinger is the main
Oh,
backup.
don't say that. Don't say that, Michael.
Nick Foles did not play great. Like he was playing against already backups, and it was not good.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah, I
really
mean, jokes aside, I like Nick Foles a lot, even as a non-Eagles fan. But I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Frank Reich, of course, has that relationship with Foles, but I don't think what you're saying is ridiculous. But
yeah.
at the same time, I'm always rooting for Nick Foles. He still has a couple more preseason games, so maybe he'll turn it around. But
No, no,
I
no,
think
no.
there's a
I don't. Yeah,
scenario
like
where
I'm
they
not.
rust. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm not rooting for him to fail, but it's just
Yeah.
like Nick Foles has never like I know people love to think about the Eagles run and like yeah, the Eagles run is magical, but that's like a one-time thing.
And do you think there's a scenario where Sam Ellinger and Foles both make the team? Because like,
Yes. Also,
yeah,
yeah. I
it's
also do
just not.
because
I
like
don't. Most teams don't like the roster three quarterbacks, but
I think it's possible that they me personally, if I'm the Colts, I do, considering your starter is 37. Nick Foles is probably close to that age, and he's your main backup. You're gonna want a young, decent quarterback in the
yeah,
back, just in case anything happens. Not because I'm rooting for them to get injured, but you gotta always prepare.
yeah,
So
yeah, for
I
this
do
year.
think it's possible that they could roster three quarterbacks or possibly if they feel strong enough about Ellinger, they just keep two and Nick Foles, they just, if they need to call, they'll call him. But, I mean, there's probably a position somewhere they could short them one and keep
Yeah,
three if anything.
yeah,
But
yeah. I think it's possible because I do like all three of those guys. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for sure.
mhm.
So looking at the defense, which I think is also really strong, and why I really like this team a lot. They're bringing in new defensive coordinator Gus Bradley coming over from the Raiders, and he's had a lot of success throughout his career. Going back to Seattle, he was with the Legion of Boom, but even with the Chargers and the Raiders last year as well. I think he's had plenty of success throughout his career. Looking at this defense, they brought in a lot of new players to go with a lot of good players they already had on the team. And I
Yeah.
really think this could be a top 10 unit defensive unit in the NFL. What stands out to you on this team? Someone that stands out to me is that, they brought Yannick Ngakoue. They made the trade with the Raiders to keep him with Gus Bradley to come over to pair
Mhm.
on the defensive line with Buckner and Quiddy Pay. But that's just one of a couple moves I really like. So what stands out to you?
I would say I was gonna say Yannick Ngakoue. But outside of Yannick Ngakoue, I think kind of underrated is two of the safeties they brought in. One through free agency, which is Rodney McLeod, and one through the draft, Nick Cross. I think Rodney Mcleod still got some good years in him as a vet. He's not that old. He can hit hard. He's kind of like a linebacker at safety, if anything. And then you got Nick Cross, who's a very versatile, very rangy. I saw some of his tape like pre-draft, and Nick Cross is pretty good. He's pretty underrated, I think. I think he definitely kind of gone a bit higher. The guy's pretty good. I think the secondary is pretty good, but I would say like Yannick Ngakoue and those two safeties, McLeod and Cross, were some of the bigger signings they brought in.
Yeah, they traded Rock Yassin to the Raiders for Yannick Ngakoue. So and he always is a threat to get double digit sacks. Playing with
Yeah,
Max Crosby last year freed him up, and I think the DeForest Buckner will have a similar effect on his ability to get to the quarterback this year. And I like what you mentioned about the safeties. Rodney McLeod, another former Eagle. Not that Frank Reich coached him as an offensive coordinator in Philly, but he has the relationship from Philadelphia, so he brings him in. And then Nick Cross is currently projected to be a starter on this team, despite being a third round draft pick. Julian Blackman at free safety, I think they're high on him as well. So they have a nice trio of safeties here that I
sure.
think, to your point, is pretty good and
Hmm.
definitely strengthens the secondary. And another guy they brought in was Stefan Gilmore, who it'll be interesting to see if he can bounce back from an injury riddled season last year with the Panthers, where he weirdly made the Pro Bowl. I think it was a very undeserved Pro Bowl considering he played 8 games and only had, I think, maybe 2 interceptions in those games. But
Yeah.
he still has the pedigree. You pair him with Kenny Moore in the slot, who had 100 tackles as a slot corner. He's one of the better slot corners in the league.
Oh, for sure.
Uh, I think the secondary certainly could be very good this year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And then I think also like I just think that the Colts are very good at keeping like consistency. A lot of these guys are returning, and like I think it's a pretty good team, especially because just like the Colts are just very well coached.
Yeah.
Even when the Colts like it looks like they don't necessarily have the best players on the field, like they still make it work.
Mhm.
This is just a very solid defense. I mean, the D line's pretty good too. I think the D line's kind of underrated. I think Quiddy Pay is definitely going to improve. He's going to have a jump this season. I think DeForest Buckner is solid as always.
Yeah.
They definitely overpaid him, but very solid player. Grover
Yeah,
Stewart is
he's
pretty
pretty
good
good.
too.
Yeah, DeForest Buckner, I mean, yeah, sure, they paid him a lot, but he is definitely one of the better D
He
tackles in.
is. He is. I'm just saying in the sense of
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
bang.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
But
And then the linebacker core as well. I mean, Shaquille Leonard, not Darius Leonard. He's going by his middle name now. I don't want to talk about this. Like some people are giving him a lot of crap for that, but I just want to point out like Darius Leonard, not that he's listening, but if you just told us you wanted to go by Shaquille Leonard 4 years ago, we wouldn't have had a problem with it. We just would have called you Shaq Leonard. It's not a big deal. So, but this
yeah,
year we'll be making that change. So, what do you say?
I'm not, I had no idea. I went on to Wikipedia. It just says he prefers to go by his middle name of Shaquille. Why didn't he say that?
Yeah, I know it is funny, but hey, now he's saying it, so that no problem with me. I mean, he's one of the best inside line, maybe even the best inside linebacker in the NFL. He wreaks havoc all the time.
Oh, for sure.
Him and Fred Warner, I think, are the top two.
Me personally, I think Darius Leonard's the best inside linebacker right now. I do think that like their backups, like they're not terrible. I think Bobby Okereke, EJ Speed, Zaire Franklin, these are all solid players to
Yeah.
surround the excellent Shaquille Leonard.
Mhm.
So I think that this linebacker core is very good because I think just having Shaquille Leonard, like I think just having oh god, it feels so weird.
I know, I
I want to
know.
say I want to say Darius Leonard.
Yeah.
But having Leonard around, like he's insane. So I
Yeah.
think that just having him around is a huge boost to your defense. I know he's currently out, but he'll probably be back soon.
They're switching to a 4-3 because that's what Gus Bradley runs. So currently, Bobby Okereke is projected to move to outside linebacker. The
Yeah.
future Hall of Famer, as Pat McAfee would say at the draft. But he had a jump last year too, getting over 100 tackles. I'm interested to see if he's going to outside linebacker, but I don't think he's going to be like used as a pass rusher. I guess they just want to. I feel like they almost have still two inside linebackers and more maybe just one outside linebacker in like an EJ Speed or a Zaire Franklin because
Yeah.
I don't really think Bobby Okereke is like a pass rusher, you know?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I don't think he will be because I wouldn't say like Zaire Franklin really is either, right?
Yeah, I mean you're right. More EJ Speed, I guess.
I'd say EJ Speed, yeah.
Mhm.
But no, I do think this is a very solid team. Like this is just especially like the defense. Defense is pretty good. They're very consistent with like the players they brought back, which I think is the smart move.
Definitely. And I also neglected to mention, but they also signed Brandon Faison from the Raiders. He's another guy coming over with
Mm.
Gus Bradley. He could be another starting corner because Kenny Moore mainly plays the slot, so he might take the other outside corner job. Just to wrap up the defense, do you think Stefan Gilmore can bounce back, or do you think like he's kind of starting to decline?
I think he can bounce back because I think it's the injuries. I mean, he's only 31. He's got a few good years left in him as a decent corner. And like honestly, I mean, I don't like this. They it's pretty good secondary. Like the secondary is not bad. I think they got a bunch of solid players. Nothing, no one amazing. Like except for I guess like Kenny Moore. Like no one stands out as like wow, this is one of the best at their position. But these are all solid players, and I think they're definitely going to get it done. I think Stephon Gilmore. I mean, obviously he could get injured again or something, but I think he'll come back. I think the injuries kind of slowed him down last year. But also not to underrate guys like Isaiah Rogers and Marvell Tell. Like these are also good backups that might start. Like Brandon Faison as well as you were saying. Like it's a good defense, and I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Isaiah Rogers, which I also like their special teams. Like I think Blake
Yeah,
and Chip and Sanchez have been very consistent.
my
And then
guys.
Rigoberto Sanchez, yeah. And Blake and Chip, he dealt with some injuries last year, so he didn't play every game. So it'll be good to have him back. And then Isaiah Rogers as a kick returner, you mentioned him,
Mm.
he's trying to get more playing time as a corner as well, but he's definitely he's a good kick returner as well. So I think they got a lot of good special teams play.
For sure. And I totally feel that Isaiah Rogers should get more playing time because like he's got the speed, he can keep up
Yeah.
with like, some of the best. And I think he needs to start more. But no, I do agree. The special team is also really good. Like Rodrigo Blankenship, Rigoberto Sanchez, some of the better duos. They're very consistent, good players. Those are my guys, my Hispanic guys. Naeem Himes is the punt returner, Isaiah Rogers kick returner. Like this is a very solid special teams unit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, what I think we're both in agreement, this team is just really well rounded
Hmm.
in general, which can bring us to how we think they're going to perform this year. Now, I was already pretty bullish on the Colts before I looked at their schedule, but now that I look at it, like I could see this team winning, 11, maybe even 12 games. I'd probably predict 11-6, but I really like their schedule. I mean, I'll read it off here. They start at Houston, then they're at Jacksonville. They're home for the Chiefs, home for the Titans, in Denver, home for the Jags. So they play the Jags twice early in the year. And then they play the Titans again. They're at Tennessee the week after that. They play Washington at home. Then they're in New England, in Vegas, home for the Eagles, home for the Steelers, in Dallas. Then they got a week 14 bye, and then they're on the road for the Vikings. Then they got the Chargers in New York for the Giants, and then home for the Texans to wrap up the year. To my eyes, you tell me if you agree. I don't see that many challenging games on this schedule.
I agree. I think some of the few notable challenging games I would say are Chiefs. Um, Possibly I think one of the Titans games they'll probably split 1-1.
We can
Um,
talk about that when we get to Titans. I have some opinions on the Titans, but
yeah, I they might.
yeah,
So like let me do for sure games that I think might be problems.
yeah.
Are I would say Chiefs, Raiders, and Chargers are like and Vikings are like the super kind of like maybe this is an issue. But I mean, this is a very good schedule for them. Like there's a lot of like teams who are not projected to be great.
Yeah, I agree because I've been doing the categorizing I like to do on a lot of the schedule breakdowns we've done, and I didn't write down a single game where I considered them to have a guaranteed loss coming their way, which is not something I've done for most of the teams we've previewed so far.
Hmm.
And I look at they got a lot of toss-up games. Like there's a lot of these teams that I think it could go either way. You mentioned the teams you mentioned. I would throw the Eagles in there as well. Maybe Denver, we'll see. But when I look at this, I think the fact that they play the Titans very early in the season is a good thing because in my opinion, we can talk more about the Titans in a couple minutes, but I think the Titans are a team with all the changes they've made that I think it's going to take them a little bit. Like I think they're going to be better in the second half of the year. So I think it's good
Yeah.
that the Colts catch them early because I think the Titans are going to need the working guys like Traylon Burks, Robert Woods. Like these are a lot of new faces to that offense, and I think it's good to catch the Titans early. I like that when they play the Vikings, they're coming off a bye, so even though it's a road game, they'll have a week of preparation. I like that they play the Texans and the Jags in the first 2 weeks of the season. I like that they end with the Giants and Texans. I don't know. I just think they're gonna have. I think they might run through this schedule at a certain point. I could see this team going on a like a 4 or 5 game win streak at certain points. I just think they're gonna have a really successful season. I think they're gonna win the division by a landslide, as I'll get to with a
For
team.
sure. No, I totally agree. I think this Colts team is really well rounded and their schedule is pretty. I think it matches up very favorably, very really well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Yeah,
glad we're in agreement with that because, yeah, just to wrap it up, like they don't play the Rams, they don't play the Packers, they don't play Tampa, they don't play the Bengals, like the Bills. Like really only the Chiefs is a surefire contender. And even then, because of how competitive that division is, one of those teams is going to be really good because they're all pretty good. So they do play that division. But other than that, like we said, I think they're in pretty favorable position here. Just to put a bow on the Colts, I think we're in agreement for sure that would you say they're the division favorites, or do you think the Titans have a shot here?
no, I'd say they're division favorites for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with